You claim the only way the rocket that landed in Poland could do so is if someone in the Ukrainian army pointed it there. What if a Russian rocket was coming in to hit Western Ukraine and an interceptor rocket tried to hit it and got lost?
Look, I talk about the geometry of target acquisition. If you want to play this game, then let's do it the right way. Let's get a map of Ukraine, the geopolitics of famine. You confused me, Jeff.
Sorry about that. Scott wrote 2 articles about this today. One for us today here in Scott Ritter Extra, and then he also a couple of days ago for RT. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, you could do what I did, which is to get a map and then plot out the places that the Russian missiles hit. So we're not talking about a hypothetical Russian missile. We're actually speaking of an actual inbound missile. Then we can figure out what type of missile it was and figure out where the Tu-95 Bear bombers were launching from. They said somewhere over Volgograd. Then we can draw a line there showing the azimuth of the approach of the missile. And then we can sit there and think, how does an S-300 work? There is a giant scanning radar. Where are you going to position that? Maybe a little bit back, scan out. And then you have a tracking radar. It's going to be a little bit forward. You see, you want to intercept the missile before it hits the target. That's sort of an important thing here. So any missile that we're going to be launching at the Russian missile is going to be to the east side of the target, oriented eastward towards the incoming missile. Now, we can play azimuth games all you want. Want to come a little bit from the north, want to come a little bit from the east, whatever you want. You can come in any damn direction you want as long as it's from Russia. And then once you do that and you set up all your azimuths, then you start saying, launch. Launch on what? See, it launches and then it heads in the direction it's supposed to, hits the tracking beam and goes to the target. That's always going to be going to the east, northeast, southeast, east. The missile went west. You figure it out. You see, I used to do this for a living, but forget me. I'm just somebody who used to do this for a living. All you experts out there who think you have the targeting solution that can come up with a scenario that has the missile that's supposed to hit a target coming in from the east, pivot and go west. Now you say, oh, Scott, it could lose track. Okay, what's it tracking on then? If it loses track of a beam heading east, what does it track on? It's going to go into a scan mode, but the scan mode doesn't take it 180 degrees. It doesn't work that way. It never works that way, ever. And you say, well, what if it's malfunctioning? That means there's a surface control problem. A surface control problem means the missile is going to start doing this, and then it's going to hit the ground. Normally, at that point in time, self-destruct mechanism takes over. Pop. Usually there's a timer attached. Hasn't tracked properly. Pop. If they don't have a self-destruct mechanism, some older missiles don't, then it just flies in the direction it wants to fly. But how do you get it? Here's the key part, guys. How do you get a missile that lost flight control to suddenly pivot 180 degrees, head to Poland, and suddenly all the flight controls work? Now it's flying in a stable, straight azimuth towards Poland. How do you do that? You can't. So now we come to what makes the missile work. The missile tracks on radar. So if the missile is going to fly in a straight azimuth towards Poland, somebody pointed a radar at Poland. And Poland ain't the direction you point a radar at. You point the radar in the direction of Russian because you're trying to shoot down Russian missiles. That's how air defense was. Air Defense 101. Anybody out there thinks I'm wrong? Please tell me where I'm wrong. But I'm not.
Given the newer NATO members' knee-jerk reaction to blaming Russia for the recent Polish missile incident, including Zelensky doubling down on this allegation, do you think this will undermine the credibility of previous allegations against Russia?
Well, it should. I mean, there's the old saying, one lie, all lie. And if you go to trial and you bring on a witness and the witness lies, you just assume everything else that he's ever said is a lie because one lie, all lie. One lie, all lie. The Zelensky government's been lying since day one. They don't know how to tell the truth because they're doing nothing but playing a propaganda war. They've lied about Bucha. Hey, Elon Musk, they lied about Bucha. Bucha was a Ukrainian perpetrated war crime. Ban me again. They lied about Kramatorsk. No, it was a Russian missile. Really? It was a Ukrainian serial number on a Tochka-U. your missile, but Russia fired it. No, they've lied about everything. Ukraine can't tell the truth about anything. So why would we expect them to tell the truth now? But the thing isn't about Ukraine. We know they lie. The worrisome thing here, and I touch about it in the article, is how quick Poland, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania jumped on the Article 4 bandwagon. Oh my God, Russia attacked Poland, Article 4. But they all knew that Russia didn't attack Poland. How would they know that, Scott? Because they're NATO members. And NATO right now saturates the sky over Ukraine with every sophisticated intelligence collection platform known to mankind. And I'm telling you right now, a missile doesn't pass gas without NATO knowing about it. All right? If the missile even thinks it's going to launch, NATO knows about it. It lights up on its screen. I used to see these screens light up when we were doing this with Iraq during the Gulf War, and that was old technology, and we knew everything that happened. And there wasn't anything that happened that we didn't know about, and it's better today. So as soon as the missiles launched, they're right there, boom, launch. It tells you the launcher, the unit ID, everything about it, right there on the screen. It shows the azimuth of the direction. It gives you the altitude. It gives you the speed. It gives you the heading. It gives you all this stuff. And NATO sat there and went, boom, oh, Ukraine launched a SM-3. The other thing they knew about is the radar. NATO knows, I'm telling you right now, that a radar was activated, and they know the direction it was oriented. They know how long it was operating, how long the beam was being transmitted, because it's all collected, everything. They knew. They're in the command center. So all these Polish, Baltic countries knew it was a Ukrainian missile, and yet they came out and said it was a Russian missile. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why would they do this? Because they know Ukraine's losing the war, and they know what a Russian victory will mean to them. So they're doing everything humanly possible to get the rest of NATO engaged in a conflict in Ukraine. Now, as I said in the article, that means nuclear war, because there's no way NATO tangles with Russia and it doesn't end up going nuclear. So all of these countries are willing to commit suicide and take you with it. That's what you need to understand if you're listening to this program. Poland wants you dead. Latvia wants you dead. Lithuania wants you dead. Estonia wants you dead. Ukraine wants you dead. These are not your friends. These are the worst nations in the earth, governed by the worst governments in the earth, and they all want you to die because they want NATO to fight Russia in Ukraine, and that means a nuclear holocaust for everybody. And I'm not joking around here, guys. This is as serious as it gets. So pick up the damn phone if you're an American, call your politicians and say, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, but the U.S. is not on board with this, as we heard from Brandon in the opening video. So what do you make of that?
Well, the U.S. doesn't want to commit suicide.
No, but what do you make of the other nations acting as if they can get away with this without the U.S. being on board? Did they fail to communicate in advance with the U.S.?
Well, they didn't communicate with the U.S. They wanted to convene an Article 4 meeting and see if everybody went along with it. They're dumb. Look, desperate people do dumb things, desperate things. But this isn't, some corner pickpocket, playing games. We're talking about nuclear war here. And yes, thank goodness we have the United States being mature, but Germany's not mature. Germany's not mature. German leaders talking about a no-fly zone, even though they know that Russia didn't do it, because everybody's saying that even if Russia didn't fire that missile, it's Russia's fault. And here's the beauty of it. It's Russia's fault. If they hadn't invaded Ukraine, then they wouldn't be launching missiles that the Ukrainians have to intercept and end up attacking Poland. Okay, I like that logic. But my response to that is, if you didn't invite Ukraine into NATO, we wouldn't have this problem to begin with. If you didn't perpetrate the Maidan coup in 2014, we wouldn't have this problem. If you didn't falsify your intent on Minsk II, we wouldn't have this problem. Don't blame Russia for all of your failings. History didn't begin on February 24th, 2022. History began a long time prior to that, dating back to pre-2007, when Putin stood before the Munich Security Conference and chided America and the collective West about what they were doing. This is a problem decades in the making. Don't blame Russia for the failures of American policy and the failures of NATO. It's not Russia's fault. Russia had no option. I'm one of these guys, and Jeff, you know this. I chide my government. I say war is the last option. You have to exhaust every possible venue to avoid war before you even think about going to war. And I will challenge anybody here right now. Tell me one venue Russia could have taken that they didn't take. One. Give it to me right now. Type it here if you want to. If you don't want to do it right now, email me. I challenge you. It's an open challenge. One thing Russia could have done that they didn't do to prevent this war. And you can't come up with one because Russia did everything. This was literally a war of last resort. It was done to prevent an imminent attack on the Donbass by a 60 to 100,000 strong Ukrainian military, trained, equipped, organized, and directed by NATO. Directed by NATO to attack the Donbass. This is a NATO war. God, Russia, go ahead, nuke them. I'm tired of this shit. I don't mean
Alberto from Italy. In Europe, we're facing winter with millions of refugees fleeing Ukraine, businesses going bankrupt because of sky-high energy prices, and fascists sprouting up everywhere. Why is the U.S. doing this? Profiteering? Neocon fanatics? What's behind it? What's the motive?
Well, it appears money, literally. I mean, we're gouging Europe on gas. Europe, if you haven't woken up yet and you live in Europe and you still think, wow, America's our friend. They're on our side. Thank God we got friends like America. Take a look at your energy bill and understand that's 100% because of American policy. 100%. We're the ones that told you to stop buying cheap Russian gas. Why? Because we have American gas we can sell you here, less volume, but 20 times the price. It's a great deal if you're an American businessman. We're making money like you wouldn't believe. Our gas industry sitting there going, more, more, more. And they don't mean more gas because we don't have any more gas to give you, but we mean more price. We're going to jack it up. Your businesses are going out of business. Why? Because we want to attract them to America. We want them to quit Europe, come to America because we're your friend. We're on your side. We got your back. We don't have anything except your money.
And in addition to people losing their lives when weapons hit humans and buildings and so forth, you addressed another consequence of this situation in your latest article for Energy Intelligence. A lot of the world is going to be lacking food. It's a security issue. It's a survival issue.
Well, right now I actually had to do a lot of research in this. Normally when I write an article, it's because I know something of it. But this was a topic that interested me, but I just, there's no way I could have just sat down and write this article. I literally had to read a lot of stuff, college level research, going back years into the policy of food donations. What prompted food donations? A surplus American crop is what prompted it at the end of the Second World War. And we decided that we would release it. And then we started using that as a way of expanding agricultural business, controlling global food prices. And also anybody who thinks that when food aid is provided to help people prevent starvation, that's not even the main purpose. The food aid is managed to control food prices so that food pricing can be dampened for the West. And we see that here. When the ships were released, in the article, I talk about 87 ships. Only 3 of them went to the nations that who were starving. The rest of them went to people who aren't starving. Why? Because they need to keep the price of food down. The second those Ukrainian drones went out and hit the Russian Navy fleet in Sevastopol, and the Russians said, we're done with the food deal, prices in England, who gets none of their food from either Ukraine or Russia. So you think, well, since we don't acquire food from Ukraine or Russia, we're okay. It's not a problem. Nope. Because that affects global food prices. Suddenly the British couldn't afford to have fish and chips because, that fish thing's got to be rolled around in this crunchy little bread stuff. But there ain't no grain to make the bread. There is no bread. There's no nothing because the prices went through the roof. And the Brits are like, holy cow. Well, that's the whole world. So the very first shipments that came out were to fulfill existing food contracts to keep food supply chains viable so that the price of food can come down. Now, having the price of food come down actually helps the hungry people, because most of the food aid that's given isn't actual food, it's money. So we give money to organizations to buy food that is then provided. And if the price of food is down, the money we give goes further to buy food that can be delivered. But if the price of food goes up, we ain't giving them more money, and so they can't afford it, and that's where people starve. But the big problem isn't the people going to starve this year. The big problem is, in addition to the food supplies being interdicted, fertilizer is the key. If Russia is like the big fertilizer producer in the world, and if Russia doesn't get its fertilizer out there, people aren't going to be fertilizing their crops for next year. And that's where everybody's going to die, is not this year, but next year. And that's why Putin's been emphasizing the need to get, I think it's 300,000 tons of fertilizer that's currently locked up in European ports. Hey, Europe, you suck, by the way. I just want to just say that straight up. Europeans, you suck. Want to know why? Because you may sanction Russia, but everybody's agreed, including the United Nations, that Russian food and Russian fertilizers can't be sanctioned. But you're keeping them in your ports because you're playing stupid games, and people are going to pay a price with their lives. Don't tell me about European values, European human rights. You have none. You have no values. You have no human rights, because if you did, you wouldn't allow this to be happening. We have a crisis brewing, and it's all because of you. Don't blame Russia. Blame yourselves. Look in the mirror. Jesus. Anyways, right. That's what I got out of researching this article.
All right. Well, I'm boycotting a European wine. This is Australian wine. I'm sure
Good Lord, you went from the devil to
Joseph from Graz, Austria. What do you think about the Yemen conflict and the U.S. role in it? Do you agree with Scott Horton that it's a genuine genocide caused by Saudi blockade, effectively enforced with U.S. support?
Well, let's just put it this way. The term genocide is overused. Everything's a genocide. Everything's a genocide. We use genocide this, genocide that, genocide this for everything. Yemen is a true genocide. I agree with Scott Horton on this one. It's a genocide being perpetrated not only by Saudi Arabia, but the United States. The fact of the matter is the Houthi have been a thorn in the Saudi side for some time now. They refuse to bend a knee, to use a Game of Thrones reference, to the Saudi royal authority. And they are very effective fighters. In a stand-up fight, they wipe the Saudis every single time. The only thing the Saudis have going for them is air power, and then the ability to blockade Yemen with the assistance of the United States and other, because it's a UN blockade, thanks to the United States. But the civilians in Yemen are paying the price, especially the younger, the children. The images that come out of Yemen should just sicken you. It's horrific. But good Lord, here in the United States, you have to literally look long and hard to see an image, because we just put brown people to the side. We could have, I'm not denigrating the suffering of the Ukrainian people, but I can take a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, well-fed Ukrainian girl, get a glass cut on her face with a little bit of blood coming down here, and it'll be front-page coverage everywhere. I can put 100 Yemeni children who are living skeletons. You see their heart beating through their chest. It's horrible, and no one's going to look at that because they're brown people. They don't count. They're Arabs. They're Muslims. Whatever you want to say. They don't have the same, but one little blonde-haired, blue-eyed Ukrainian girl with a tiny little scratch here, headline news, every humanitarian organization in the world is going to be rushing to help her out. I'm not saying she doesn't need help, but good Lord, the people in Yemen have been suffering for a decade now, and nobody's doing anything. We dismiss them. We say, oh, it's all about it. They're pro-Iranian. That justifies genocide? Just because the Houthi and the Iranians are together geopolitically on opposing Saudi Arabia? That doesn't justify genocide. Nothing justifies genocide, but America's committing genocide, not just Saudi Arabia. It's too easy to say the Saudis are doing it. You don't want to know how the Saudis stop doing it? When we stop supporting it. But we're not going to stop supporting it because it's part of the regional conflict to contain the malign Iranian influence in the region. So you just justified genocide because Iran happens to live in a neighborhood and wants to tell everybody, hey, we live here too. There's no malign Iranian influence. The malign influence in the Middle East is America, because we don't live there. We have to travel thousands of miles to come to the Middle East and interfere with their things. The Iranians live right there. How can you say the Iranians are interfering when they're simply doing to their neighbors what we do to our neighbors? You know, we have an interest in what goes on in Canada, what goes on in Mexico, what goes on in the region. We pay attention. We have trade agreements, etc. We have defense agreements. Iran does the same thing, and that's suddenly maligned because Saudi Arabia doesn't like it. Tough luck, Saudi Arabia. You're a genocidal, maniacal country, and until you stop your attack on Yemen, that's the only way the world should view you.
Any comment on a video circulating around on Russian prisoners of war being shot at the back of the head by Ukrainians? Will there be justice for them?
Well, I mean, I've seen the video, and I have no words. I mean, these are the action of criminals. These aren't soldiers. People need to understand the Ukrainian government is a criminal government, and when a fish thinks from its head, that's an old Russian saying. And the Ukrainians just reek from the very top. And that disgusting, decrepit rot comes all the way down and infects everything to the basic soldier. If the soldier believes that he can get away with something, if he's encouraged by his leadership to treat the Russians like subhumans, and that's what they do, they murdered these soldiers. They murdered them. They came out and they surrendered. One guy, the last guy, came out with a weapon and he opened fire. I'm telling you right now, in the Marine Corps, we could kill that guy, but we cannot touch the guys down below. Now, if he's fighting us and I throw a grenade in there to get him and the shrapnel wounds some of the guys on the ground, okay, that's too bad to be them. But my job then is to go in and treat those wounds, evacuate them quickly to get the medical care. These guys went in and they executed them all. That's murder. Now, the bad news for the Ukrainians that did it is they're so stupid. Here's the arrogance of the criminal-minded lunatics that populate the Ukrainian military today. They murdered these guys, and they showed their faces on the videotape. And the Russians now know who they are. They have their names. These boys are going to die. End of story. I'm not condoning this. I would prefer they be arrested, tried for their crimes in a court of law, and held accountable to the rule of law. There's going to be soldiers' justice, and it's not going to be nice for these guys, but they don't deserve any sympathy. They murdered soldiers who had surrendered, who were no longer posing a threat to anybody. It's a violation of it. And here's the thing. Screw Ukraine. We know they're a criminal enterprise. We know it. We shouldn't expect anything less from these guys. What about the United States? I can guarantee you that if a video came out of Russians executing Ukrainian soldiers, it would be on every single TV station in America. The president would be having a news conference. Jake Sullivan would be demanding, that God come down and strike the Russians dead on their own. We'd be saying Vladimir Putin belongs in The Hague. We'd be doing all of this crap. But now the Ukrainians execute Russians, and there ain't a frickin' word anywhere, except here, because we are the leading edge of truth-telling in American alternative media today. Scott Ritter. You like that?